How's it going, everybody? Dieter and Hutch talking to you before week one of the NFL season, a couple days before the 49ers get going against the New York Jets. Monday Night Football, the 2024 season is underway. Jake, you feeling the excitement? You feeling the positive vibes these days?
Honestly, I am. And I think that's rare for us, right?
Right. Who
Feeling
are we?
actually genuinely excited and not couching it in something snarky or sarcastic. But yeah,
Right.
I'm actually excited. It's after this weird long off season we had to actually be like, oh, the season's around the corner and we have something concrete to talk about. Yeah, it's exciting.
And if there's no harm, no foul from this weird long off season, that would be a bit of a surprise. But the Niners are somewhat trending that way, and we'll have a breakdown of what happens in week one, what we expect to happen in week one coming your way here on this channel. But we want to talk about the 2024 season at whole and what we think the Niners are going to do, and then get into the details of how we think the Niners are going to go about their business here in 2024. And I want to start on the offensive side. I want to start with the passing game, right? That is the
Yep.
NFL in 2024. It's a pass first league. And as much as Kyle Shanahan might not like it, I think that there are plenty of reasons to believe the Niners, who already got a little bit more pass happy than in years past, with Brock Purdy as their quarterback, could maybe even push it to another level in 2024. You get Brandon Ayuk back, obviously, Debo Samuel in a sort of kind of contract year to be
Right.
determined there. You get George Kittle still at the peak of his powers, we believe. Obviously, Ricky Pearsall is not going to be a factor for a while, if at all, but you like what you've seen out of Jacob Cowing. Jawan Jennings is back on a contract. The Niners have depth at wide receiver that, frankly, we were watching some 2021 tape trying to get to the bottom of what the 49ers could see with the Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. We had to go back to watch
Yeah.
Packers tape in 21 with
Right.
Nate Hackett. We're watching the 21 team and we go, these guys went to the NFC. What? This
It's
team wasn't very
it's
good.
startling. They've got Mohamed Sanu out there. In the third it was the third game of the season.
Third
They
game of
played
the
the
season.
Packers at home. And they've got Mohamed Sanu out there, Trey Sermon starting,
Yep.
Jimmy is out there, and something about Jimmy is you watch Jimmy and you in hindsight, you go, "What were we all thinking?"
Well, I
Like,
wasn't thinking it.
I
I was number
well
one Jimmy hater.
well, that's not necessarily true, and I think you were caught up in it for a moment. Not to say, like, he's, like, a great quarterback, but I think we were like, "Oh, this guy's" and for a while, he was okay. Like, in 2019,
Okay.
he had a good season. He had, like, a moment, in what was it, 2022
Mm-hmm.
where he came back. Like, 2022, he's playing pretty well, but, like, you watch him and just the stone-footedness and the way if there's any pressure on him, like,
Over.
he's taking that sack 100 out of 100 times, and it's just a totally different team, you know? Besides Mohamed Sanu, just it doesn't look nearly as dynamic. They were just it's when they discovered, I think, Debo as a running back out of
Right.
necessity because 'cause they're like, "We don't have any other options."
And we don't want to throw the ball anywhere down the field, so just hand it to them so that we can get this over with. And obviously things have changed pretty dramatically. It's a head coach in a quarterback league. The Niners have had the head coach, at least as an offensive play caller, since 2017, really. And now they have the quarterback in Brock Purdy. My main takeaway, not to relitigate the Jimmy Garoppolo era or even the Trey Lance era or even the Brian Hoyer era, is to say that Jimmy Garoppolo actualizes this offense into something close to what Kyle Shanahan wants it to be. And in fact, might even have so much sway that he can turn it into what Brock Purdy wants it to be. I'm seeing a team that already played 11% of its snaps last year in an empty formation. That's very un-Shanahan like. I wouldn't be shocked at all if that went up 15, maybe even 20% in the upcoming season. 49ers almost half a point per play out of empty last year. That's very Big 12. That's very Iowa State. And with the receiving weapons that the Niners have, with the way that they're probably going to have to get the ball out of Purdy's hands early with the pass protection that they have, even with Trent Williams back, wouldn't be shocked at all to see the Niners go a lot more empty a lot earlier in the season, spread this thing out a little bit more.
I'm with you, and I think they do that thing too where it's like, "Are we empty? Are we not?" They
Right.
love doing that where it's, McCaffrey and Debo, and then they'll put one of them in the backfield, and you don't know how to account for it just to get the personnel on defense that they want. And, yeah, I'm with you. I do think that they open it up a little bit more and, going back to that Super Bowl, and I think it's hard to say that they wouldn't make decisions based on that, right? Because you
Mm,
don't want to just make every decision based off of that you lost the Super Bowl. But at
right,
the same time, they lost because they had one guy in Ayuk who can kind of separate from man. Debo can't. And
right.
so they drafted Ricky Pearsall, like who can separate from man. And again, we don't know what Pearsall's timeline is going to be like, but I think in the games that matter down the stretch, I think they're still going to be optimistic that like they have a guy who brings something different that can possibly help them in that regard and really spread it out. But I'm with you. I think even without him, I think they're going to spread it a little bit more. And they can also trust Brock Purdy. You go back to that first game he played against the Dolphins,
That's right.
and the Dolphins just zero blitzed him every play.
That's right.
And he just hung in there and threw darts. And so I think that's something that Kyle has a lot of trust in him, and that allows them to do that more.
Against the blitz last year, Brock Purdy, second in the NFL in EPA per play. He was blitzed 35% of the time last year. I mean, they tried, they dared. And by the way, the Baltimore Ravens, they dared a lot and they won that day. But when you blitz Brock Purdy on the whole, he's going to get you a 52% success rate, 22% explosive play rate against the blitz last year. That's crazy stuff. Something else to note here in the pass game. I'm glad you mentioned all of the movement that the Niners like to do. And I think it goes even beyond just Debo and Christian McCaffrey. I think we're going to see a lot of George Kittle standing in the backfield as almost a fullback. We're going to see
Did
a
you like
lot.
that handoff that he took in that Packers game?
That's right. That's right. Last year, the Niners had 121 snaps where they were in 21 personnel out of the shotgun. That's getting back to that Big 12 base. And here's, if we really want to narrow it down a little bit more, because they're not going to be the Arizona Cardinals,
Right.
and they're sure as hell not going to be a reiteration of Texas Tech under Cliff Kingsbury. But last year, the 49ers, when they were in 11 personnel, you think 11 personnel, you think the Rams, you think the Bengals, you think about the Sean McVay branches of the Kyle Shanahan tree. Niners were in 11 personnel less than a third of the time last year. The Rams, by the way, in 11 personnel, 99% of the time last year. But they were first in the NFL in EPA per play. They added a point every 3 plays in 11 personnel. And in 12 personnel, so that's one running back, 2 tight ends, they were number 1 or number 2 in EPA on that. And that was almost 1 point for every 5 plays. I don't think that the 21 personnel Niners, as we have known them, and again, that was almost 50% of their plays last year. I don't think that we're going to see that team this season. It doesn't suit Purdy. It doesn't necessarily suit their personnel. And obviously, with Kyle Juszczyk taking a pay cut to stick around, I think that the Niners know, hey, we're going to have to transition out of sort of the classic 21 personnel stuff. It obviously creates conflicts for defenses when you move around your very versatile players. Juwan Jennings, wouldn't mind seeing him in the backfield every now and again. He could even throw the ball. He's a former quarterback. I think that Kyle Shanahan's offense, as we know it, is probably going to look a little bit more similar to Sean McVay's offense this year than it ever has been. And it will still be distinctly Kyle, but Brock Purdy, being the guy that he has been so far in his career, I think we're really going to see that touch. And Kyle's going to adapt the offense to a certain degree to fit Brock Purdy's skill set and to help Brock Purdy out as well. A lot of shotgun, not a lot of this under center stuff, not a lot of turning your back to the defense, because frankly, Brock's not as comfortable doing that. And they're not comfortable with their pass protection to where they want Brock turning his back on the defense.
Yeah, I think they're definitely, and I remember that's why they stopped doing it with Jimmy, because Jimmy couldn't really. They ran a lot
He
of
had
play
a
action.
knee injury, and they it got to the point where Jimmy couldn't even do the stretch handoff. They had to pitch it.
Right, and so they just abandoned that almost completely and pretty much stopped running play action, ran everything out of shotgun so Jimmy could see everything. And there is something as a quarterback to doing that. Jared Goff is an exception where it's you're like you have to boot him out,
Right.
to
I mean,
make that
Kirk
offense
Cousins, there's a lot of quarterbacks who
right.
uh,
And I
who
don't
need
think the
that.
Niners are going to abandon that. And
No.
I don't think they're going to abandon 21 personnel, but I am with you. I do think something that when you talk about the Shanahan offense, you talk about all these trees. What actually makes them distinct is not that they totally represent each other.
Mm.
Um, the
Yeah.
thing you talk about is outside zone run. Like that is sort of the defining trait. And after that, it gets a little bit like there's motion. But what really defines them is that they adapt. They evolve year in and year out, and they add new wrinkles. And so when you talk about it, or like, back in the day when he was asked about the West Coast offense and Kyle got snippy and said, it's not the West Coast
It's not the
offense.
effing West Coast offense. That was a great
Right.
first impression I made.
Because it's not. And
Isn't.
it's not really the same offense that, it's got a lot of staples, but year in and year out, it evolves. And most offenses do. But I think the Shanahan tree, McVay, the best offensive minds, they are willing to adapt and fundamentally change in ways that, they might not necessarily be comfortable with at the start, but they look at what defenses are doing and they adapt.
There's a pragmatism to them, to be sure. All the great coaches are pragmatic. The ideologues get left behind. It can work for a while, but it won't work for a long time. And a name that you got to think about this season as it pertains to the 49ers isn't part of the 49ers. He hasn't been for 2 years. It's Bobby Slowick and what he was able to do with the Houston Texans last year. Bobby Slowick had, 1 year as Kyle Shanahan's right-hand man, 1 year as the main guy after Mike McDaniel leaves. And all he did when DeMeco Ryans took him to be his offensive coordinator in Houston was turn a rookie quarterback into one of the finest quarterbacks in the league and take a Shanahan offense that you thought you knew and really take it to a different level. And sometimes it was a little much, but they pushed the ball downfield in Houston. Yep. And they have a lot of speed. They have crisp route runners, but the depth of target on in their passing game is out of this world. They have the quarterback to execute it. I think the Niners think they have the quarterback to execute it. Nobody was better in the NFL pushing the ball deep than Brock Purdy last year, and he did it far more often than people would think. But I wouldn't be shocked at all. Kyle being a pragmatist, Kyle understanding how you need to challenge defenses. That's what's at the heart of all of these offenses. You're finding weaknesses in the defense. You're putting defenses in conflict on their rules. Bobby Slowick got his chance, and I think is going to be a bit of a trendsetter for other Shanahan-style offenses. And I think for the man himself this upcoming season, and if you need any evidence to that, I know he just changed his number. Apologies to Jacob Cowing. I think that he is a prime example of a player that Kyle Shanahan probably would have never have taken in prior drafts. But he took him in this one because they see something that's somewhat similar, and certainly not a copy, to Tank Dell. And you would say, I remember the skepticism on taking Tank Dell when Houston drafted him. And what did he do? He had a monster rookie season because the offense adapted, the offense changed to fit that personnel, to fit a college-style passing game with a rookie quarterback and obviously a guy from a spread offense. I think that Kyle Shanahan's going to be integrating a little bit of that. And if he doesn't, we'll find out what that looks like.
Right. But I do think it shouldn't be understated that, Brock played last year. He played from the start, and, they sort of said he's all good to go. But at the same time, it comes out that he was actually still rehabbing and
that's right,
not 100%, 100% until something like halfway through the year. So the fact that he didn't have to go through that, the fact that there are no restrictions, I wouldn't be surprised. And the fact that not that the Niners are ever going to take games off early in the year, but that there is an urgency with the way the schedule is set up to really go and start off, and by I think it's the week 9 bye, to at least be at worst 5-3. Like, they're not looking at it that way.
That's a worst case scenario. 5-3.
That's a worst case scenario. But like, I think part of that, and Purdy having no restrictions, I am with you. I think pushing the ball down the field a little bit more, even if it's running the same concepts a few yards deeper. But again, they do. They have run their digs and their deep crossers at certain depths because they know how coverages are going to respond. So maybe they stick to that, but I do think they're gonna push it a little bit further down the field.
Brock Purdy passes a 20 or more yards in the air last season, 99.9 PFF rating. Perfect.
Pretty good.
Perfect on deep passes last year. Let's talk about the run game. The run game starts with a man who is now under contract for the next couple of years. His name is Trent Williams. He's probably the best player in the National Football League. He wears number 71. And last year, the 49ers, when they ran it left, had an EPA per rush of 0.33. The league average was minus 0.10. They averaged a point every 3 plays when they ran it off the left tackle. When they ran it to the left tackle. Left guard was pretty good too because Trent Williams has some proxy there. That was better than league average. The issue for the 49ers, and we got to start with the offensive line because ultimately that is where the run game starts and really stops in many ways. The issue was the middle. And they were below league average at running it up the middle and running it to right guard. They think that they have the right answer at right guard now in Dominic Pooney, who is a rookie coming out of Kansas. They think when he gets his hands on somebody, it stays on him. He's a really good in short bursts. And as a zone blocker, he has a real chance to be a contributor in a positive way from day one. But the 49ers run game, still one of the best in the NFL. Run it behind Trent when in doubt. And when you have Christian McCaffrey, J.P. Mason, Jordan Mason, perhaps Isaac Guerendo at some point, you have three backs that provide a lot of different looks. Obviously, McCaffrey can do it all. You got Mason as a guy who can really be a power back with some, usable speed there as well. And then Guerendo as just a home run hitter, one cut and go.
You called him Raheem Mostert, and you see it in the way he moves. The other thing that comes with Raheem Mostert is injuries.
Yeah.
But if you can get him on the field a little bit, even if it's just kick returns this season, like there is upside. I want to stick on O-line for a second because people have debated whether the 49ers have upgraded at certain positions and all that because there always has to be stupid debates going on about are they better, are they worse? And I think you look at it, just go position by position. It's Trent Williams. He's a year older and coming off a bad Super Bowl, but it's still Trent Williams. So they're same, right? I'm going to say that's the same.
Fair play.
Left guard, Aaron Banks, coming off, I believe, a broken pinky.
Yep.
And I will say he's in a contract year. Pretty good time for him to play well, especially because the 49ers are probably not going to keep him. They don't pay people that are in the middle for the most part. Juwan Jennings is kind of an exception, Dre Greenlaw, but those are sort of players they could get on the terms that they liked, and where the markets are limited. Aaron Banks is probably going to be going elsewhere, and I think if he plays well enough, he'll be happy to. Center is a spot I'm very worried about.
Should be.
I like Jake Brendel, but he really, really massively struggled to snap the ball. He was like throwing scuds basically on his snaps where he was bouncing the ball to Purdy a little bit. They were low a lot, and his knees are of a concern. That's been a problem. And it's not like he's a guy who's been like an anchor anyway. He's a guy that's got competent strength to like hold on for a second, especially when he's got help. And he can move in the run game. Like his athleticism, that's why he's there in the run game, because he can pull and he's smart and he can do all the things you ask. But health-wise, I'm worried because behind him is Nick Zakelj and maybe Drake Nugent on the practice squad. We'll see. I'm not convinced Nugent can anchor. We love him, but in the run game, he's great. I don't know. We'll see. They don't have great center options.
Right.
Then
you got
Pooney,
a rookie at right guard.
Then Pooney. Yeah, here's the thing. Pooney looked great. I will wait to anoint a rookie, especially on the offensive line, until I see it in the regular season sustained. I think if I see it game one and he looks stellar, whatever, I won't be worried. But I need to see it. I need to see it in a game that matters. And then at right tackle, you're paying your bargain bin right tackle. Colton McKivitz basically nothing to start for you.
Right.
And he's good in the run game and he's bad in the pass game, which is their MO, but it's for cheap. So that's sort of what you sign up for. So are they better? It depends fundamentally on whether Jake Brendel can hold up and whether Pooney is as good as advertised. But I don't think we can say definitively this offensive line is much. I think probably it is with Pooney instead of Burford and Feliciano. I'd feel good about that. But if you're
to be determined.
Yeah, it's TBD.
And listen, offensive line is still ultimately where games are won and lost. And going through this past offseason, it was very clear this might be the worst offensive line in football, if not for Trent Williams. So what happens if you don't have Trent Williams? You hate to put that out into the universe, but we did just have to embrace the hypothetical for several months. And for the 49ers, that not only puts a death knell to the run game, it puts one to the passing game as well. So there's a reason that Trent Williams got his money. He is vital to any success the 49ers are going to have on offense this season. And by the way, they were by the advanced numbers, I've been listing off EPA and success rate and all that stuff. By those numbers, that was the best offense in the NFL last year. By more conventional numbers, they were the best offense in the NFL last year.
No question.
We're going to talk about the defense here, but I think that it's fair to say that the 49ers offense does need to take it one step further in 2024. That just repeating what they did last year might not be enough, that they need to push it one step further and to be legitimately in the pantheon of all-time great offenses with the personnel that they have and with the possibility of a bit of a step back on defense. And let's get into that right now. Let's start with the run defense, because that was a huge issue for the San Francisco 49ers last year. Actually, like a shockingly bad run defense. EPA per rush, 25th in the NFL.
Yes. People have undersold how bad it was because sometimes the stats didn't look bad, and there were a few games where it looked bad. I remember some guy on Twitter, and I know I shouldn't get annoyed.
That's
but I remember texting you. He was like, I think they're going to have a really hard time against the Lions, and it's going to be a major problem because they don't have an answer. And the guy went, running doesn't matter. Rushing doesn't matter because you don't score points. Well, the Lions were demolishing the 49ers in the first half by gapping them into oblivion, running duo and split zone, and just double teaming on the interior. Like with the wide 9, you got defensive ends who are going hard.
Yep.
And if you flip your hips and say bye, they can't get involved in the play. And then you just double team and move up. And that's what the Lions did. And they just demolished the 49ers up the middle, and they had no answer. Part of that is Steve Wilks. Part of that is personnel. So where do you stand on your confidence? I think they will be better against the run. I do not think they will be good against the run.
I think that it would be a far cry to expect them to be good against the run. And there's a couple of points at which this hinges currently. Let's start with kind of the least important, but still important one, which is opposite defensive end to Nick Bosa. The Niners have brought in Leonard Floyd. If you're a longtime watcher of this show, you know my stance on the Leonard Floyd signing. Yetur Gross-Matos was also brought in. You feel a little bit more bullish about that, but he's not in the category of someone that you want taking all of the snaps at a 5 technique, at a 7 technique, covering up the C gap. After that, it's nobody of note. And this is a team.
Robert Beal, who has proved nothing
and can't set an edge. And so you have a situation where you had defensive ends, and they brought through a ton of them last year, that just outside of Clelin Ferrell could not set an edge. And that's all you're asking them to do. Just contain the run game to inside the line. Let your linebackers get to them in the gaps because you were able to set the edge. And whether it was Randy Gregory or Chase Young, they just refused. They couldn't do it, or they refused to do it. And it became egregious. And by the way, it became a big red flag for every team playing the 49ers down the stretch. Eric Armstead was in a lot of ways holding up this run defense last year. That sentence alone should give you an indication of how fragile the run defense was for the 49ers last year. Let's talk linebacker. So now if you have set the edge, let's say that Leonard Floyd does, in fact, go out there, hold the edge, prevents guys from getting on the outside, busting it outside. Fred Warner's as good as it gets. That's still the case. That's been the case for a long time now. I don't expect it to change anytime soon. But you have Devondre Campbell as your starting weak side linebacker. Now, Devondre Campbell was once a wonderful, brilliant player. Yeah, I haven't seen
all pro in 2021 for a reason.
I haven't seen that player in more than a minute. And I'm vastly curious to see how he looks in a position that requires both incredible instinct and I think a God-given speed that long ago left him if he ever had it. And as much as he is a player who has a ton of experience and a ton of smarts, and I expect him to be able to read and understand the game plan, I'm not sure if his body is going to allow him to execute it. You got to remember why the 49ers have him in the first place. They signed Eric Kendricks this past offseason, or at least agreed to a deal with Eric Kendricks.
He reneged for the Cowboys.
He went to go be the starting Mike linebacker for the Cowboys. He was supposed to be the will linebacker for the Niners. And Devondre Campbell, who was still sitting around without a job, comes on in, it wouldn't shock me at all if they ended up going with D Winters or somebody else on the roster in the not too
Yeah,
distant future.
I share most of your concerns on Campbell. I will say I thought he had a decent camp. It
He
doesn't
did.
really matter
Yeah.
until see it in a game. My thing with him is I think if he's as he looked, I think he can give you a pretty good, let's say, first half of the season. But the amount of injuries he's had, especially over the last 2 years and had to play through,
Mhm.
I have concerns about him holding up for a full season. And I think the 49ers' hope is still to get like Dre Greenlaw back this season. I think that is their hope. But again, it's an Achilles injury. And so you cannot predict if he will come back, when he will come back, what shape he'll be in.
Right.
So you have to presume it's Devondre Campbell and D Winters and all these other guys they have. And so
Which is
I think
passable. You could be in a
it's
worse
passable.
scenario. You're not
It's
going out there and hoping that a rookie can do it. But if the best case scenario on this team is you're funneling a lot of stuff Devondre Campbell's way, and I just think that there should be a good amount of skepticism on whether he can handle that kind of workload, because
yeah,
Fred Warner is going to be schemed out of a lot of plays just based on how teams handle their run blocking, which brings us to, I think, inarguably
yeah.
the most important player against the run for the 49ers this season, and he's a new player. It's Malik Collins. They acquired him via trade from the Houston Texans, I believe the same day that they designated Eric Armstead
They
for a
were like
release.
trying to work out a trade where they'd send Armstead to the Texans. I
Right.
think, if I'm not mistaken, they went for Jonathan Greenard
Mhm.
and they passed. And so the 49ers cut Armstead. He went to Jacksonville, and
Mhm.
then Texans said, okay, you can have Malik Collins.
Yes. And there's a lot to feel good about with Malik Collins. We didn't see a lot in the preseason. What we did see was encouraging, but he is going to be the focal point because the way that this run defense is structured, the way that this defensive front is structured, you have Nick Bosa going for it, you have Javon Hargrave going for it, and whoever's coming off the edge, sometimes, yeah, they have to set the edge, but they're also told, hey, go get it, go get after it. This is a one gap, all go system. Someone actually has to take on double teams. Someone actually has
Yep.
to win some battles on the interior. Someone actually has to stuff the goddamn run. And in this case, they're going to be asking Malik Collins, because you look at the rest of the depth chart, there's
He
no
is
one
all
else
they have.
no one else could do it. And Hargrave is not that kind of player, as we saw again and again and again late last season. Tell us a little bit more about Malik Collins and what you expect from him this year, Jake.
So Collins is he's actually a very, very, very interesting player, because sometimes you watch him and he's just not locked in on the run game at all. And he's just purely a pass rusher, and you don't know what to expect game to game. And, it's funny, even like you look just his PFF grade, like he got like a 45 run defense
Right.
grade on the season, where like 60 is sort of average to okay. But that was like the first half of the year. Down the stretch, he was actually really solid in the run game. And I watched him just versus the Jets because that's what's coming up.
Right.
And he was a menace.
Yes.
Like, he is a hoss. Like, the dude packs a punch. He can shed blocks. He's got very forceful hands. And weirdly, he has like an incredible spin move that's way
Mm,
too fast for a guy of his size.
that's fascinating.
But the question is, like, it seemed like what the Texans did is they said, Malik, we sort of need to rearrange your focus, where you're an every down player for us, and your focus first is power and holding a gap versus trying to just beat a man one on one. Because that's what happens with the 49ers a lot, is if you're just trying to beat a man, and as Chris Kasurik says, like, get off, he's just telling them to get upfield,
They're not
then
even
you're
playing man. They're just trying to get through the gap before they can close the gates.
then your first priority is to ignore the run. So fundamentally, that's a problem. So I think with Collins, you're going to get a guy where you just say, hey, be a force when you get your reps and you get a one-on-one shot and you're beating a guy and you see it's not a run play, go get it. I am It's interesting, right? Because you're just talking about personnel, and
Mhm.
Hargrave is not really a run plugger. We know
Nope.
that.
Nope.
Collins, I think, can be, but it's not like his specialty. I think he has that capacity, but doing it down in and down out, have to see it with the 49ers. I do think he can do it. But behind him, Kevin Givens is like a smaller guy who can sort of snap off and make some run tackles, but he's not really a two gap sort of player.
He's a fine
And
change
then
of pace. You can throw Kevin Givens in there for a couple
yeah,
of series, and he'll do just fine at sort of everything.
but Jordan Elliott is a guy that's like sort of
What is he?
what is the word I'm looking for? He's a paradox where he's this
Hmm.
giant guy, and I think if he was playing in the 1980s, they would say stand there and just swallow up space. And because he's big and athletic, they're like, "Go get him, man. Go get it." When in reality, he should just be standing there and eat up space. Like he
Going
should be
full
the
Al
nose tackle.
Woods. Yeah.
But you watch him and because he's big and he gets a little taller, a little more vertical than you would want from a guy of his stature. You'd want him to just stay low and sort of pile drive.
Mhm.
Like he kind of gets pushed out. You saw it in the preseason. He was getting knocked out of
Just
gaps
washed
and
out
they were
again
running
and again
against
and
him
again. Yeah.
easily. And so that's a major point of concern for me. Whereas like Elliott is a guy I'd want to like rearrange his focus, where basically everyone who's not, Javon Hargrave, like try and hold a gap.
And something to note here as well is that the 49ers are ostensibly going to move to a cover 3 system again, which is something that they obviously wanted to do early in Kyle Shanahan's tenure. Robert Saleh, now Jets head coach, was brought in to run the cover 3 system. It's something that Saleh was about to lose his job running. And they ultimately went to a more multiple system, a lot more cover 4. It got to the point where he then got the Jets job. They bring in D'Amico Ryans, who had been shadowing under Robert Saleh. He runs a lot of multiple stuff. They say that it's still a cover 3. And yes, they play a lot more cover 3 than most teams, but it was a very multiple situation. Now, this season, you have Nick Sorensen coming in. Nick Sorensen, a guy who came up through the Gus Bradley tree, coming from the Seahawks system, understands sort of the tenets of the Legion of Boom and what it is that the 49ers are trying to replicate. And of course, the other guy, the shadow defensive coordinator, as we long called him, is Brandon Staley, who, say what you will about the guy, not a very good head coach, but puts together very intricate, very bespoke game plans and can provide a level of creativity that, frankly, I don't think the 49ers have had under Kyle Shanahan on the defensive side yet. But I want to go back to Collins here real fast. Can he do the job? Do you have evidence, Jake, at all to him being able to do the job that's being asked of him? Because if he cannot, the 49ers, again, 25th in EPA per rush last season, and that
Yeah.
was with solid, compensating play from Eric Armstead in the middle. Can he do what Eric Armstead was able to do? Can he be better than that? Or are the 49ers going to regress in an area where there's not a lot of room to regress?
I think he can. Do you want some proof? Do
I'd
you want
love
a
to see
little?
it. Thank
Do
you.
you want a little clip? So we got a clip here. We got a clip here on the. If you're watching at home, sorry, these things autoplay. Let's slow it down. For those of you listening, I can give you a little play-by-play.
Thank you.
Basically, what we've got here, you've got Texans, Jets. Forget which week this is. It was, I want to say around week 13, something like that. And Laken Tomlinson and Mekhi Becton are looking down the barrel of Malik Collins. They
That would
Laken
be at left
Tomlinson
left guard, left tackle.
left guard, left tackle for the Jets. They're looking down Malik Collins, who is right there in the B gap, and they are going to try and double team block him. And it's not going to work. Eventually, Laken will pull off, and the second he gives even an inch, Malik Collins slips right around him.
Let's
So
take a
we'll
look.
play it here.
Well, that's a
But
big,
you see
strong man.
that, like, even to roll it back, like, even the moment of impact there where Malik Collins is tied up with Laken Tomlinson and Mekhi Becton, like, he's tied up with him. They're
Mhm.
having to really give their full effort. And Laken Tomlinson, in an ideal world, would throw a little punch here, and he would pull off Collins and go pick up, I think it's the safety number 6,
Yep.
and
He's
then
coming in through the A gap.
that would set up the run. But because Collins is such a hoss, they're having to hold on for dear life. And, Collins rips off, turns around Becton, and just stuffs that run. So listen, again, I'm not saying to expect that every play. I am just saying
He's got
down
it
the
in him.
stretch of the season, he's got it in him, and he's a lower center of gravity than Armstead too, which I think helps.
Pass defense is an area that the 49ers can really shine this upcoming season. Now, obviously, a lot of that will have to do with the pass rush, and I think there are ample concerns about the pass rush. Uh, I don't know what Leonard Floyd is. I don't know what Yetur Gross-Matos is. I think I got a pretty good read on Robert Beal, and I don't think that's good enough, but they got 97, and 97 is still part of the cream of the crop when it comes to pass rushers. This Niners secondary is immensely talented,
Yep.
and not in the abstract way of, oh, they could get there. The cornerback group that they have might be as deep and of high quality as any team in the NFL. And the safeties that they have fit the scheme that they're trying to run to a T. It will come down, as it so often does, as it almost always does, to the play of your safeties. And you're getting Talanoa Hufanga back as a strong safety, a quasi-Sam linebacker.
Yeah.
You're in really good shape there, especially against the run. You feel good about him against tight ends. Maybe not so much about against guys in the slot, but, you got to make a sacrifice somewhere. George Odom looks lighter, sprier, and capable of playing that position. Malik Mustafa, the rookie out of Wake Forest, might take a little bit of time to get into the mix, but when he gets his eyes on the ball gets found fast.
Listen,
he is
man.
a missile, an absolute missile, but it's all about Jair Brown for this team.
And so I wrote like 10 questions that the Niners have to sort of answer or that they're facing this going into this season. And safety is one of them where you run cover 3, Jair's single high, but that's not obviously just going to be you can't just run single high, a single safety out there every single play. And they were running 2 safeties a ton.
2 high safeties.
Right, 2 high safeties. So what's interesting about last year, and I'll talk about the safety group currently. You've got, again, Hufanga, you set it up perfectly. I wonder how they handle it from the start, where they didn't trust George Odom to go and play safety.
Correct.
Do they trust him this year?
Yeah.
Talanoa Hufanga, he's not going to be ready week 1 from what we can tell. We'll see how they handle that. Malik Mustafa, I doubt they trust him right away, but there is something there. And if he did play early, I think you got a pretty dynamic safety pairing. It sounds like they're going to bump up Tracy Walker from the practice squad.
That's right.
But the point is, it's Jair Brown. He is what's going to make that thing go or not. And, when I went back and I watched just basically the conference championships against the Lions and the Super Bowl, and basically the way they had Deshaun Gibson, who's playing in the box around the line of scrimmage, and then Jair was about 25 yards deep, just preventing anything and everything. And he did, for the most part, a really good job. He came downhill against the Lions. He saved a bunch of touchdowns. It didn't matter because the Lions scored anyway.
Yeah.
But he did do a good job. Him and Gibson had some question marks where Gibson, once you asked him to cover anything beyond 15 yards, it was pretty dicey. Anything inside of that, he was really good. But it is interesting, what the safety position is going to look like. And if they ask Jair just to be, that center fielder, or if he's around the field, or in the box a little bit more. He made a really nice play in one of the preseason games where he just saw it immediately and he triggered downhill. And I think that's going to be the most important thing, right? It's that game speed, that recognition. Is it going to be quick enough? And that, I think, is what sort of differentiates you, especially as a safety, because there were a couple times against the Lions where Jahmyr Gibbs' speed, and he did that to everybody, or his speed just took him off guard and he took a bad angle.
Yeah.
But I think year 2, being as smart as he is, I'm intrigued, and I do feel more on the optimistic side that he can take a little bit of a leap.
He'll have to. Because, again, there's no option behind him. You're not playing Tracy Walker as a single high safety in a cover 3 system if you're trying to win the Super Bowl. You're not going to play Malik Mustafa in that role. It's probably not one that he's built for, even with his recognition skills that are readily apparent as a rookie. And you're sure as hell not playing Talanoa Hufanga there. So it has to be Jair Brown. And when you're talking about a cover 3 system, it was hard enough when they were doing a lot of 2 high, right? It was hard enough when they had the Steve Wilks keep everything in front of you, a lot of quarters system.
Or
And
running Tampa 2 in the red zone. That's
yeah,
another thing.
he wasn't very good at it. It was not a good defensive coordinator. And, maybe if he had a nicer personality, he'd still have a job. But here he is. Regardless, now you are talking about a role that has produced greatness or has completely torpedoed teams. And when I say, and I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million times more, safeties are destiny. When you're in a cover 3 system, really, it's safety is destiny. And you think about the 2 great defenses of the last 20 years, singularly great defenses. You're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, early to mid aughts or tens, and the Baltimore Ravens of the early to mid aughts. And you're talking about Ed Reed and you're talking about Earl Thomas. Now, I am not in any way saying that Jair Brown is on those guys' level. But what made those players so great is that they were 2 steps ahead of everything. All Jair Brown has to be is 1 step ahead. Right. And he'll be a great all-pro caliber player. He has the talent, and I think he has the stuff between the ears to be that kind of guy. But can you you showed me an example earlier of a play where Jair Brown didn't have.
Yeah, this is sort of the thing, right? So this is, again, going back to the conference championships. For those of you listening, basically it's empty. The Lions are setting up for
wide.
Yep, they're setting up. They got 3 wide receivers to the left, Amon-Ra Brown to the left. 3 wide receivers to the right, Amon-Ra Brown all the way on the left. Yep. And then I believe it's Laporta tight left. And
this is against nickel. 4-man, 4 down linemen.
The 49ers are showing 2 high safeties. You got Jair Brown on the left, and he's basically, his job is to help help with Ambry Thomas, who's funneling everything else inside. And the Lions are going to go to Amon-Ra on a sort of a mid-level dig here, probably about 10, 15 yards. So I'll play it here. And what you want to look for with Jair is, this is like a rookie safety who, it's just like a half step too late. It's not like a bad play, but if he takes the leap, this is an interception. And so I'll let it run here. Goff drops back, throws it. And so when you look at Jair, he gets up, he's clapping. He knows, like, he should have made a play on the ball.
It's even better from the all 22 angle, which we'll have here in a second. So you see Brown at the very top of the screen. And by the way, this is a great throw from Jared Goff. And he rips it. He throws it behind Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit as to prevent Jair Brown from getting his hands onto it. But what it highlights is, again, the 1 step ahead. And I'm not sure if Jair Brown is recognizing what's happening in the moment or if he knew what was happening and couldn't actualize it soon enough. Either way, it just has to be a beat faster, and it has to be just a more than a scotch. I mean, significantly more decisive.
Yep.
Because not only was he a step behind, but he also took a false step outside as to sort of just half. It wasn't a half-ass play because he's going for it, but there's the recognition in his mind of, I'm the safety. I got to stay back.
Yeah. Instead of driving at Amon-Ra St. Brown, he takes a step outside and then has to cut in where he's leaping sideways. Instead of, even if he can't make an interception, he's like, got to hit on Amon-Ra St. Brown. So again, it's not like a bad play. No. It's almost a great play. It's just, that's going to be the difference, I think, with him is, does he recognize? Because you see it and you slow it down to when Goff starts his motion, and he can take a step, 1 step earlier and 1 step in the right direction. That's all it would be for him to make a play on that ball. And I think that one play that, I don't have it queued up, but in the preseason where he saw what was happening and he triggered the moment, Troy Polamalu. Like, it's not like he was...
That's a great example.
It's like Polamalu's entire thing was timing, knowing what a defense was going to do, and getting after it right at the right moment. And if, again, like you said, he doesn't have to be 2 or even 3 steps ahead. He just has to be 1 step ahead. And if he can do that and just get that half second, 49ers defense, I think, is going to be in really good shape, at the very least in preventing explosives and turning the ball over a little bit more.
And let's be clear about what they have on the outside. It's to be determined who's going to start. But you have two of the best players at their respective positions in Charvarius Ward, who obviously he's not like a Pat Surtain or a Sauce Gardner or even a Derek Stingley, but he is very, very good as an outside corner. And then you have Diamador Lenore, who has quickly made himself one of the 3 or 4 best nickel corners in the league. Now, the Niners, I'm not sure what they'll do because I bet that they're probably going to be a little funky with it, all things considered.
No question.
As to limit some of the costs that might come down the pipeline for this team, which is already so deep into salary cap hell. So I'm not sure if they'll start Diamador Lenore as an outside corner and slide him in the way they did so frequently last year. But the other options, and when you're in nickel 75% of the time, roughly, especially against the more modern offensive schemes in the league, you have Renardo Green, the second-round pick, who we both think had a wonderful camp. You can play him inside and outside. I think that he has a chance to be a really special player, and he'll probably be the team's number 1 corner next year, given his current trajectory. You have good options in Isaac Yiadom, who had a wonderful year for the Saints last year and came into camp, got a little injured at the end, but came into camp and really made a quick impression. Even Rock Ya-Sin you could throw out there if you had to. The Niners have a depth at corner that's really special.
Yeah. I think that's the question they face, right? Is like week 1 against Aaron Rodgers, do you want to throw a rookie corner out there? He's shown he's really solid, but like Lenore back in that Packers game, like he kind of got the worst of it when he was back when he was wearing 38. He
made himself a pretty easy target with that number.
He did. And yeah, that is true. Like rookie number. I think I will say Renardo Green just switched to 0.
Yeah.
From 31.
Well, that's literally a target now. Throw it here.
That's true. But I wonder if they start Yiadom, given that this guy's done it. He's been in the league. It's a Monday Night Football game, season opener against Aaron Rodgers. Do you want to just limit, or do they say it's purely the best guy? And we're just going to go with Renardo based on merit. And that's to say it's a question because Yiadom had a really good OTAs and training camp until he got hurt, but he was out for, like a month. So I don't know if they've made a decision on that yet. I think it's they probably have, but we'll see.
They're just not going to tell us, and we're not going to find out until the game actually starts. A number to keep an eye on here. Last year, the 49ers blitzed less than a quarter of the time. I'd expect that to go up. And in fact, I would expect them to look very different than what we have already seen from this team. We've seen some experimentation with defensive ends standing up. We've seen some experimentations with defensive tackles at defensive end. Maybe all of that was just preseason nonsense, trying something out, see if it wants to stick. If it doesn't, no problem. Or maybe that's a sign of things to come for the San Francisco 49ers. But needless to say, I think that there's room for regression in not a good way with this defense. But if things click and you do have a situation where the pass rush is as good as it was last year, if not better, you have a situation where you are getting guys setting the edge opposite Nick Bosa and getting the Malik Collins that this team desperately needs. And you're in a situation where Jair Brown takes that step forward and becomes not just a player who's capable of holding down a free safety spot, but being the anchor of a pass defense. If all of those things happen, and the if is the operative word there, the 49ers have a chance to have a really special defense.
Before we move on to more big picture, I would be shocked if this defense regressed. The run game concerns me. I'm higher on this defense than I think you are. I just think the coaching will help too. I think the personnel in the back end helps a lot. Even Floyd, like whatever, he's at least a guy who's been around and you know what you're getting where you didn't know what you were getting with Gregory and Chase Young.
They came in halfway through the season. I mean, there's a reason that they brought those
personality
guys in.
Wise, like you didn't know if they were bought in, like they hadn't been around it. And
then
so you had
dogged
questions.
It in the playoffs.
No question. And so that's interesting. And then I think the last part I want to mention, like Fred Warner, this is like a chance for him with a coordinator that he's going to have a little bit more trust in and can have an open dialogue, and not have to sort of coordinate the defense himself and just be stuck
Well, he
with
won't
play
have to
calls.
play so much goddamn free safety this year.
Right. Or, maybe he will, but in shots where it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really interesting. One thing I do want to mention, I talked to Fred earlier this offseason just about like his ambition and he's excited. Remember, that's not revelatory at all. But one thing to watch out for, like hip drop tackles. I
Great
just
call.
want to point out
They
that
banned him.
like because he was like you told me he's like they're trying to make the game softer. And I sort of I didn't think too much of that. And then I watched some of the tape from last year and I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna blow up Fred's spot, but there are a couple it depends how they enforce it. It depends how they enforce it. I'm just saying that's something to keep an eye out for, and I want to see how they enforce that throughout the league. And I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers get screwed in a couple games on some of those calls.
Well, let's be clear. It wouldn't be getting screwed if they're committing the foul that is being penalized. But if that is a factor,
making a tackle,
they say you can't make the tackle that way anymore. Don't make the tackle that way.
I'm just saying it's like going to be a harsh way to like lose 15 yards.
I'm with you. I also think it's ridiculous and harsh that they kick guys out for targeting in the college game. No one's trying to target except for that one guy. He was definitely trying to target. Let's go into the season predictions. We're not going to go game by game. Certainly there are some games to talk about amid this. The Niners have an absolute bear of a schedule, and that includes the Chicago Bears in week 14, it should be noted. It starts off rather light, as weird, and you want to use the term paradoxical, the New York Jets, ladies and gentlemen. Who the fudge knows what they are? I'll just say fuck. Who the fuck knows what the Jets are? We're going to find out on Monday night. But then you get Minnesota, who had just a disastrous offseason. Sam Darnold will be their starting quarterback. An interesting enough defense. Don't want to get too deep into these guys. Rams, Patriots, Cardinals. Then you get the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. And I would say that's the game where it turns to hell. That's the game where you have to have some hay in the barn, because from that point on, buddy, there are no breaks, if any.
You need to be 4-2 at minimum.
At minimum.
Yeah, and I have them being
coming through the Seahawks
5-1 at that point.
So what is yours? The Vegas over under never changed, even with all the stuff that was happening. Is
it at 11.5?
11.5. I think we're both under on 11.5. I'll speak for myself here. I see 7 losses on the schedule. I think they split with every team in the division. I think Arizona gets a game off them. I think that the Rams get a game off them, and I'm confident in my bones that Seattle is going to get a game off them with Mike Macdonald, who just did a wonderful job with the Ravens. Obviously a little different. Ravens defense versus Seahawks defense. Geno Smith versus Lamar Jackson. But regardless, Mike Macdonald taking over in Seattle, I think that defense will get to a point where they will be just hell to play, and that the Niners will have to pay the toll there at some point. So they split. I got losses: Kansas City, Green Bay, at Miami. You say, oh, Miami late in the season, baby, they're going to be in South Florida. You're flying cross country after a game against the Rams on Thursday Night Football. Losing at Miami, Mike McDaniel, in this case, getting the best of Kyle Shanahan, and then losing Monday Night Football, Detroit, week 17, setting up a week 18 game at Arizona that they got to win, and they do. Not to make the playoffs, but to get a good seed, to make something interesting out of all of it. I think this team makes the playoffs. I think they win 1 or 2. I think they are a NFC championship game loser this season.
To who?
I want to caveat this very, very quickly. I'm not sure about Jordan Love. Yeah. I'm just not sure. I am sure about everybody else on that team, though. I'm sure about their coaching. I'm sure about the talent that they added on the defensive side is going to improve that defense dramatically. I am sure about their wide receivers. I'm sure about their running back situation. I think that it's the Green Bay Packers winning at Lambeau Field to go to the Super Bowl and play the Kansas City Chiefs again. Rematch of Super Bowl I. This time the Chiefs get them. But I think that's how it goes down. I think we'll be at Lambeau Field in late January.
Yeah.
And I don't think Robbie Gould's going to be around to save him.
Yeah, they brought in Xavier McKinney. They drafted our guy Javon Bullard out of Georgia, who is actually genuinely the only safety I had over Malik Mustafa.
That's right. You love Malik Mustafa.
I mostly just thought there were a lot of bad safeties.
They have Jeff Hathley as their defensive coordinator. He was formerly a Niners assistant. He was the head coach at Boston College for the last couple of years. He is as good a defensive coach as there is in the NFL at any level of college football. He quit the college game, didn't like where it was going, wanted to teach the pros. He's got a young defense. Obviously, he can work pretty well with young guys.
I don't know about their linebackers.
I think we're going to find out. I think that the Packers have the highest ceiling of any team in the NFC this season. I include the 49ers in that conversation. And at this point, if my questions of Jordan Love prove to be unnecessary hand-wringing, then I think the Packers hit that ceiling, and that means that they beat the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. That's my prediction.
I like the prediction. I'm not as high, but I am. I basically think it's like the Packers, the Lions, and Niners.
Yeah.
I think it can go kind of any way. I think the Niners age, wear and tear, that I think is the likeliest undoing for them. I think if they somehow end up healthy against any of those teams, I'd feel good about their chances.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. I have them going 11-6.
Okay.
I have them splitting with the Rams, splitting with the Seahawks in sort of reverse order, like winning at Seattle on Thursday night. And then when Seattle's second half of the season, I'm kind of with you on McDonald putting it together down the stretch. Yeah. Seattle comes in and then starts a little spiral. I think they sweep the Cardinals in a way where the Cardinals, they get them early and then they get them late in the game where it might not matter for the Cardinals. And it might really matter for the 49ers. So I have them going 11-6, beat the Jets, beat Minnesota, lost to the Rams, beat New England, beat the Cardinals, beat Seattle, lose to Kansas City, beat the Cowboys. I think those two things feel inevitable, have felt inevitable for the last few years, the 49ers losing to the Chiefs and beating the Cowboys.
Maybe it flips this year. Maybe this is the year. I don't think it is, but maybe it is.
You know, they haven't beat the Chiefs. We talked about this on a previous pod in a decade.
Yeah, 2014.
It's awesome. So nothing to worry about there. They got lucky. They got a bye smack dab in the middle.
They always get a bye smack dab in the middle.
No, they got like early ones for a couple years. Last year they had a good one. This year
the NFL takes care of good teams with their bye.
Yeah. Earlier on, the 49ers had some sort of rough ones.
Yeah.
But they got one right in the middle. I think they go at Tampa Bay and win, then lose to the Seahawks, 3-game losing streak, at Green Bay loss, at Buffalo loss, then a 3-game win streak, beat Chicago, beat the Rams on Thursday Night Football, then they have like 10 days off before Miami.
That's right.
Go down to Miami, win, lose to Detroit, beat Arizona, finish 11-6.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I guess the real difference here is that I have them losing. It's interesting. So I have them losing to Arizona once, but I don't have them losing to Buffalo. You have them beating Miami, losing to Detroit. I have them losing to Detroit and losing to Miami.
Yes.
And ultimately, I think that you hit the nail on the head. Health is going to be such a thing. Last year, this team was 4th in adjusted games lost in a good way, in that they lost very little. And we saw what happened when they did lose just a little, or maybe more than a little, 71 and at the time 19, pretty big deals in Samuel. And of course, Trent Williams, they lost them. They went on a 3-game losing streak and their offense looked average at best. So I don't think that they'll be able to repeat the injury luck. I think that they are at as significant a rest disadvantage as any team in the NFL. I think their travel itinerary is absolutely brutal, particularly late in the season. You want to talk about a real motherfucker. You got at Tampa Bay. Sure, it's after a bye week, but you're going across the country. Okay, then you got to come back and you get to play a division rival at home. Then you got to fly to Green Bay, Wisconsin, come home, do Thanksgiving, and then fly to Buffalo, New York. Come
Yep.
back home. You get the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams. They're a wild card. They might be a wild card literally in the NFC. Then you get a Thursday night game after that. And then, hey, you got the Thursday night game. You had a little bit of rest. Go to Miami. Fly across the country. Oh, and then come back and you get a primetime game against the Detroit
Tough.
Lions. I mean, just saying it out loud makes it sound ridiculous. And
Yeah.
if you add injury to that insult, I think that it could be a pretty harrowing final few games of the season for the 49ers. So again, as I said earlier, you better have hay in the barn by the time harvest comes around in October, because once it gets going in a real mean, downright vindictive way. The NFL loves parity. We're going to find out how good they are at controlling it with this 49ers schedule.
I'm with you.
Where do they end up in the playoffs there, Jake?
Oof.
Because we both think they're playoff teams. We're not saying that they're the team that's slipping.
Yeah, I think they end up in a wild card game.
Of course.
I think they win a wild card game against, maybe it's Chicago.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Home against Chicago?
Home against Chicago. I think that's a fun prediction.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be home against Chicago. If the 49ers are in the wild card, do you think they win the division? I guess 11 wins should probably win the division, right?
I guess it would win you the division.
Yeah. But you're still in a wild card game. Everybody but one team is.
Right.
Host Chicago. That's like a 2 seed, maybe a 3.
You've got 3 NFC North teams maybe making it. You got
That's
Packers, Lions, Bears, and then no one else in the,
Well, you're only getting one NFC South team. That's just by law. I couldn't tell you who the hell it's going to be. Probably Atlanta. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Could be Carolina. Who's to say? I mean, at this point, that division, anybody's guess. But do you think they go to the NFC Championship game?
I do.
Okay. You think they win?
I do. Because you said no, I'll say yes.
Okay. Who do
and
they
then
beat?
They lose in the Super Bowl again.
You think they beat Detroit? You think they beat Green Bay? You think they beat Atlanta? Who do you think they beat?
Atlanta. Oh, man.
I'm just throwing a name out there. I didn't want it to be.
I think they go to Detroit and beat Detroit. And it's really sad because everybody loves Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they go and they lose in the Super Bowl again. Not to Mahomes this time, which makes it worse.
Who do they lose to? The Fireball brand, the boy from the Central Valley, Buffalo Bills.
I'll say the Bills. I don't even know if the Bills make the playoffs. I just want to say the Bills just because, that would be awesome. They trade Stephon.
I think it would be awesome in that regard. Well, I'll tell you, I don't think it would be awesome for the Buffalo Bills to be in the Super Bowl in New Orleans, because hasn't that city already seen enough? I mean, really, do you want Buffalo Bills fans in New Orleans, Louisiana for a Super Bowl? There's not enough tables in the state. Realistically,
it's the Niners Chiefs again. Losing.
So much for that parody thing. All right, Jake. Should be fun. We're looking forward to it. We will have weekly breakdowns of what happened, what's going to happen.
Yep.
And of course, fan questions and all the news and notes in between. So stick with us, and maybe we'll have some fun along the way.
Previewing this first week coming up.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.